actually going to be very nice to get down there this morning. No, it would have probably meant about 3 months cleaning. So if nobody's ever seen my rather modified AJ, that's it. Most people know it. Most people have heard it.
So those guys have seen one.
So this particular bike, I bought it just about Christmas time, 1978, and October of '79. So 9 months later, I took it to the Britannia Rally in Britain. When I bought it, it was basically an engine and a frame with a wheel at each end. And it sort of got slightly modified.
What year is it?
So it started life as a 51 Scrambler AJS. It ended up as a 51 to 61 to 71 calf racer. There are now, I think, a total of 5 original parts. One crankcase half, the swinging arm, the rear wheel spindle, half the rear subframe. What is that? Oh, and the prop stand. That's about it. The motor, which in its day at 1951 would have turned out about 36 bhp at the crank. By the time I'd finished with it, and bear in mind once I got it on the road, it was still a work in process. It was turning out almost 50 horsepower at the rear wheel. It's a bit detuned now because there's not the roads around here to play on for that bike. But it's mostly AJS. It's been in, when I built it, it was in my everyday transport, constant use. It's probably got about, by now, about 85, coming up 90,000 miles on it in that time. And probably 60, 70,000 of that were done between 79 and 84 when I bought the Guzzi. So it was an everyday rider. So there's all sorts of other mods, like front forks were from Commando, and they're grafted into AJS yokes, which isn't quite as simple as it sounds, because obviously the fork diameter is larger, so the pinch bolts have to be machined to actually make the pinch bolts work, so there's big cutouts in it. At one point I used to run it with a big reverse cone megaphone. It got a little noisy, so in order to try and keep the noise down, I put a Goldie silencer on. That failed miserably as well. So it's still very raucous. Gas tank was a fiberglass one, pattern one made in the 60s, which is modelled on a 7R tank. The bottom's fallen out of it quite literally a couple of times since it's been on the bike. The fairing came off of a neighbour's Honda 404. I gradually tested him until I persuaded him that I had a better use for it. And I can honestly say now that it will not fit on the 404. As for the motor, it started as a long stroke competition motor. And I originally ran it quite a few years as a long stroke motor, but then the long stroke parts, competition parts, got rare, and if you put the standard parts on, it started to give a little bit of a problem. So at one point I had a crank, a Warren crank, big end bearing, So I put another one in, which was one of the standard ones. I got 600 miles out of it. So I changed it for another one, which got 150 miles out of it. The third one I got 90 miles out of it. And then I stopped, looked how much money I had in the piggy bank, and went and had a special crank manufactured with a Gorilla rod. So not only did I convert it to short stroke, but I shortened the engine, the barrel, by about half an inch. So it's shorter than short stroke now. And I used the long stroke barrel because I wanted to keep the look. Except by the time I'd finished boring the hole in the middle, I was always wondering when I first started it up whether the fins would go up and down as the piston would, taking so much meat out. But it worked very well. It had the head was modified to the later spec, so like the 60s CS head, squish band in it, and it used to run with an 1 3/8" GP, which was great for the top end, but if anyone's run with GP carbs for very long, they know that they're a little bit finicky to tick over. So I then used to use a TT carb, which was good all round, but didn't quite have the crispness of the GP. But the TTs are very hard, or were very hard to find parts for. When that wore out, I condescended to put a concentric Mark II on it, which gave me great bottom end tonking around town, absolutely nothing over $5 grand. So it's still got the concentric on it because it doesn't run much over $5 grand at the moment, because with the gearing that's on there, $5 grand is pulling about 108 mile an hour on it. So it's got a little bit of bottom end pep. It's been pretty faithful, apart from a few big ends. It's had one mag replacement. The Lucas one fell apart. That was in about 1981. And since then it's had a PTH mag on it, and it's been never a problem. It's done several Dragon rallies, which was a rally in Britain in February. So it's seen all sorts of weathers. As most people know, at the rally, just for the hell of it, when the slow races came on, I'd often put that in because it was the most ugly bike that I could think of riding for a slow race, seeing as it's geared for about 50 mile an hour at first. But it had a AMC clutch on it, which everyone knows is probably the best clutch there ever was. So I didn't have to cook that one. Whereas most of the other bikes would have been smoked blown. So other than that, standard one of those bikes, road going, weighs about 385, 390 pounds dry. So add fluids and battery, you're up over 400 pounds. This thing weighs 325 pounds soaking wet. So it's been lightened as well. It's a few modifications. It was something to do at the time. So if all of you have got a pile of those bits at the back of the garage you don't know what to do with, well, think of this and then start bolting them together. You can come up with something. That's about it. I think. Oh, the only other thing is it was specifically built to keep up with trucks and builders. It did that.
I followed you on Vincent, and I was going hard to keep up. Thanks very much, John. Okay,